Hey y'all, so today we're going to go ahead and continue in chapter 4, and the name of chapter 4 is The Mate Union with the Other, and this is out of the book Women Who Run with the Wolves. And the lens that we're looking at the book through is after you've been entangled with a narcissist, then the new awareness that you now have. The lens is that we're trying to pull what we can from these stories, which they're primarily about internal processes within a woman's psyche, and it can apply to men too. Honestly, I think a lot of this can apply to men too. But we're pulling this information as external forces as well, and that operate out in the world, and to just, pull everything we possibly can to just increase our knowledge about ourselves, about others, about the dangers in the world, about the dangers we think, and the way we think about the dangers and the way other people operate and how the darkness operates in the world, just so that we can increase our discernment as much as possible and hopefully not fall victim again to a manipulator, a liar. And because they're good, they wear those masks like crazy good. So what we're going to be talking about today, well, there's a lot, but the first section that we're going to dive into today is called The Power of Name, and again, it's within that chapter 4. So she opens up talking about how in different cultures throughout time, the meaning of names has always been very valuable, and how even they're so valuable that at times people have kept a name secret, a true name secret, because it's almost like casting your pearls. It talks about in the Bible, when you cast your pearls, then you're putting your most precious things, whatever they are, from your mind and heart primarily, out into the world for people to trample, right? And it talks about that. So she talks about keeping one's true name a secret, and it's just kind of cool when she references how different cultures throughout history have approached these different topics and the lessons and stories that have come out of these different cultures. So I just highly recommend that you get the book, and we don't have time to comb through every bit of it, but I think you'd really enjoy the parts that we don't get to as well. So she talks about in fairy tales and folk tales that it says, although there are some tales where the protagonist searches for the name of a malevolent force in order to have power over it, more so the questing after the name is in order to be able to summon that force or person, to call that person close to oneself, and to have relationship with that person. So it says the latter is the case in the Manoe story, because he's trying to guess the names of the two sisters, because that was the requirement from their father before he could marry them. And this was, a tale from back in the, I guess it's still today too in some areas and cultures, but this is clearly a story from a polygamous culture, so just keep that in mind. But it's all symbolic. The two women are symbolic of the dual nature of a woman's psyche, according to the author. And so that was the requirement of the dad, of their father, that Manoe figures out their names because they're so powerful, right? And so this is relatable to, if you're talking about, as yourself, truly getting to know yourself and becoming fully aware of yourself. It's it is a growth process, and within your own psyche. But you can also externalize the lessons that we're, all of this that we're talking about as, people out there in the world, and so that you can understand how to navigate out in the world and stay guarded, and guard your mind and your heart, and not fall victim again to a liar and a manipulator. So it says, the guessing at the names of the dual nature of the two sisters is as difficult a task initially for women as it is for men. It says, and what are the exact names of these two symbolic sisters in women's psyche? The names of the dualities, of course, vary from person to person, but they tend to be opposites of some sort. Like much of the natural world, they at first may seem so vast as to be without pattern or repetition, but close observation of the dual nature, asking after it, and hearing its answers will soon reveal a pattern to it all, a pattern that is vast, it is true, but has a stability like waves, ebbing and flowing. Its high and low tides are predictable. Its deeper currents are mappable. And then she says, Manawi guesses and guesses, but cannot guess the names of the twins with his mundane nature alone. The dog self acts in Manawi's service. Women often crave a mate who has this kind of endurance and the wit to continue trying to understand her deep nature. When she finds a mate of that substance, she will give lifelong loyalty and love. And I think that's where I'm going with this so far, is that if you have experience in a close relationship with a narcissistic individual, it's a very shallow engagement. They are unwilling to go deep in that connection, in conversation and connection and intimacy, and they're just not willing. And so I think that that's valuable to look at this, that he has, in the story, Manawi has persistence. He's steadfast in his approach. He's patient. He's so patient and steadfast in his striving to figure out these names. And likewise, the women are, they, like I mentioned in the first video about chapter 4, they're not stressing about this. It's like the whole time that the dog's going back and forth and Manawi's trying to figure out the names, and the dog's also, trying to get the names to Manawi. And remember, the dog symbolizes Manawi's intuitive nature, so it's that deeper processing. But the whole time this is going on, the women are not stressing either. So they're even, like, the dog perceives them as preparing for a ceremony by applying the lotion, the oils to their skin. And so it's that, to me, is like faith, having faith that it's going to work out. And so it's a clear difference, and she's relating this to what she calls the wildish man and the wildish woman, who are the perfect match for one another. And I think in that regard, if you look at it through what I'm talking about with the awareness of narcissism, yes, absolutely. Someone who is deep and insightful and has the stamina to want to learn and grow and develop spiritually, and have that deep connection, they're never going to be a match for someone who's shallow and materialistic. It's just not going to work. It's not going to work. And so when you're a wildish woman or a wildish man, you've got to have someone who's in that same boat with you, it would mean equally yoked, basically, in this regard. And so it says, in the tale, the twins' father acts as the guardian of the mystical pair. He is symbolic of an actual intrapsychic feature which ensures the integrity of things staying together and not being split apart. It is he who tests the worthiness, the rightness of the suitor. It is good for women to have such a watcher. And again, this is internal process that she's referring to. In this sense, it could be said that a healthy psyche tests new elements which apply to it for inclusion. That the psyche has an integrity about it, a screening process. A healthy psyche containing a fatherly watchman does not just admit any old thought, attitude, or person, only those which are sentient or striving to become so. So, a lot of times narcissistic people can try to fake you off like they are working on themselves or going to therapy, or that they've found God and they're just but that's where that verse, the tree is known by the fruit it bears, is so important. Because someone can truly go to therapy or truly go to church or whatever it is, but if there's no change behind closed doors with you, no matter what kind of mask they're wearing to the public, then it is what it is. And that's where that struggle, when you are involved with someone narcissistic, that's where you have, I think it's called cognitive dissonance, where you're having an internal struggle in your mind when you're with this person, because they're trying to portray themselves as one way, but because you're living with them or you're very close to them, whatever it is, that that's not true and real, but everybody else thinks it is. So it's an internal struggle, and you want it to be real. You want this to be real, but it's just really not. And you can't make it be. So I think having that fatherly watchman, like she talks about, within your own mind, and then being strong enough to accept the truth and trust yourself despite being told consistently that you're wrong and being gaslit. It's a process. And so developing that healthy fatherly watchman is crucial. And these are just aspects that, that get attacked when a narcissist you're with, they're going to go right to it and just make you believe that your perceptions are totally wrong and off base. So it says, the next section is called the tenacious dog nature. The little dog in the story shows exactly how psychic tenacity works. And because boy, it's persistent. It keeps getting off track and distracted, and there's tons of distractions out there, right? But it gets back on track every time and continues on the mission. It says, the mystical feminine readily understands and accepts the instinctual nature of the dog. Dogs represent, among other things, he or she who loves from the heart easily and long, who forgives effortlessly, can run long and fight, if necessary, to the death. The dog nature gives concrete clues to how a mate will win the heart of the dual sisters and the wildish woman. And that's just it, because when you are naturally, it says, when you're naturally a person who forgives effortlessly, and you can run long, and you love from the heart easily and long, those are the qualities that a narcissist is looking for. And because they figure you're going to give them, pass after pass and ignore these red flags. And so, again, these are beautiful qualities to have, but it does make you vulnerable to a user and or an abuser. And so, again, it goes back to that fatherly watchman of the psyche. So it says, the dog is similar to the wolf, only a little more civilized, although, as we see in the rest of the story, not by much. This little dog, as psychopomp, is the instinctive psyche. So again, the dog is symbolic of the instinctive psyche. It hears and sees differently than a human. It travels to levels the ego would never think of by itself. It hears words and instructions that the ego cannot hear, and it follows what it hears. So to me, that says, like, it talks about the ego not being able to hear things. It reminds me of, we don't want to believe the awful things that are right before our eyes about someone. Maybe we've invested in this person for years possibly, and we're starting to see the truth about who they are, and we just don't want to believe it. That's our ego holding on. We don't want to have to admit that we failed, that we chose wrong, that we didn't pay attention and pay heed to those red flags. It's a blow to the ego, and that's just kind of what I'm pulling from that. Then the next section is called the creeping seductive appetite. It is not by accident that men and women struggle to find the deeper sides of their natures and yet become distracted for any number of reasons, mostly pleasures of various sorts. Some become addicted to those pleasures and stay forever entangled there and never continue with their work. The little dog is also at first distracted by its appetites. Appetites are often charming little robbers dedicated to the theft of time and libido. Yours. Young remarked that some control must be placed on human appetite. Otherwise, as you can see, one will stop for every bone hawk in the road, every pie on a log, like the dog. He was constantly, distracted by good smells and treats. Mates who seek to name the dualities may, like the dog, lose their resolve as they are tempted off the path. This may especially occur if they are feral or starved creatures themselves. 2, they may lose their memory of what they were about. So I think I'm pulling from that if you are fortunate enough to find a partner that you feel deeply aligned with, it takes effort. It takes effort to get there. And that's where patience is so important, and not just giving up and just I've heard somebody say suffering from FOMO, fear of missing out, just taking the shortcut to something that may be tempting and just quicker and easier, but in the long run it's wrong and possibly dangerous and all this stuff. So it's worth it, no doubt, it's worth it to wait for that right one. And sometimes people lose faith in finding that right one, but you have to consider divine timing too. And we'll just see what else this chapter has to offer. So it says, so you see, the bone on the road is waiting for all of us. It has the luscious stink a dog can hardly refuse. At worst, it is likely a favorite addiction, one which already has cost us. But even if we have failed time and again, we must try again till we pass it by and get on with the primary work. And I think that can also apply to, if you've been called, to a higher purpose. If you're a spiritual person and you feel like the Lord has called you to a higher purpose in life, it's like that can be especially challenging as well. And it's, it comes down to tenacity and, how dedicated are you to the things that really matter, that are truly meant for you, that are truly the best for you, that are on the path of alignment with the higher power, versus just getting impatient. And that's the thing, a narcissist is very impatient. A narcissist is satisfied. Really, they're not ever satisfied, but they live as though they're satisfied, just being very materialistic and living a very shallow and impulsive kind of life. And that's never gonna fill your soul. That's never gonna feed your soul. And so in order to be able to fully step into what the higher realms have planned for us, it does require staying focused. It requires basically living like there are no temptations, which I think, once you get to a certain point, there are no other temptations anyway, because you just know what you know and you see what you see. And I think that's a good place to be. The dog is the light bringer. He is trying to bring up conscious connection to the mystical twin nature. Something rhythmically attempts to prevent this. Okay? Just like when you're on the path and, the Lord's blessing you, and although it's tough and, at times, you're always going to have something, the darker forces, trying to create doubt within your mind, getting you to doubt yourself, putting roadblocks up left and right, distractions all around, because it is a spiritual battle. If you look at it through that lens, it you know, as a spiritual person, it is a spiritual battle. And so that's kind of what I'm pulling from this paragraph here. It says something in quotations rhythmically attempts to prevent this, to bring up this conscious connection to the mystical twin nature, which I could also perceive as the part of you that you're not just human, but you're a spiritual being as well. And once you recognize that, then you can step fully into your power as a child of God. You see what I'm saying? And the darkness doesn't want you to realize this. So something that is unseen. Okay. Something rhythmically attempts to prevent this. Something that is unseen, but most assuredly is the positioner of bones and the fixer of pies. Like I was talking about, the dog is, you know, finding bones and getting off track. And pies, getting off track. No doubt, this is the dark stranger, another version of the natural predator of the psyche, which opposes consciousness. It's like there's this block. If you want to internalize it, it's like there's this block in our conscious ascension, you know, our growth, our striving to fully become everything that God has intended for us to become. So I'm going to keep this one a little bit short, and so we can digest everything fully, and then we'll come back and finish out chapter 4. There's not a lot left, and I hope you got something from this, and I just really thank you guys for coming along this path and journey with me. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. I'd love it if you wanted to subscribe, and you can always hit the bell to be notified when I post new content. Thanks so much, and I hope you guys have a beautiful day. See you soon.